think we're going to have some sobering information to start with, but firstly we want to hear from Julian because we haven't heard from him today, and we're going to hear about what he thinks the future of food is, not just in Australia, probably globally. And with that as a basis for the discussion, we'll also hear from Pennie and from Joel.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the indigestion part of the trio here. But let me say I've got some very good news for you towards the end. Okay. Let me start by saying that the future of our species is about food. If the food supply fails, we ain't got a civilization. We all know that because we're involved in food. A lot of people don't know that. They think food is stuff that comes from the supermarket. Now let me just illustrate for you. We're facing an existential emergency. You may or may not agree with me, but there are 10 huge threats bearing down on humanity. We know about climate, we know about nuclear weapons, blah, blah, blah. Food security is the biggest of the lot, okay? Because it's on a knife edge. If you think about the meal that you had tonight, and you think about the meal that everybody in the world will enjoy this evening, that meal costs 10 kilos of topsoil, 800 litres of fresh water. It used 3 grams of pesticide. It took something like 1 3/4 litres of diesel fuel to produce. It produced 3.5 kilograms of carbon dioxide. Now that's averaged across the entire world diet. That's what it takes to produce our food. And that's not sustainable. That is not going to feed 10 billion people in the 2060s in a hot, climate unstable world. Okay? So that's the old system of food production. You, ladies and gentlemen, are the new system. You are going to replace this old industrialised food system. This industrialised food system is not actually all that good for us. You know, if we, today in Australia and in America and in other developed countries around the world, 3/4 of people now die by their own hand. That is the hand holding the fork. Right? 3/4 of people in the Western world die from diet-related diseases. So this stuff that's coming at us out of the supermarket is not good for you. It's not good for the planet, as I just illustrated, but it's not good for your health either. People are now dying younger. In America, life expectancy is actually starting to decline for the first time in history, which is astonishing. You know, so we're starting to see the effects of an industrial diet on the health of the population at large. You know, there's a lot of other stuff happening, levels of pollution in big cities and so on. But the diet that we live on today is not a healthy one. And the reason is because it's not about food, it's about money. Pure and simple, the corporations that drive the world diet are only interested in profit. They're not interested in whether or not you die from this or that, cardiac disease or cancer or whatever it is. So we have to change that. The food supply in the world has to change. It must change, and it will change. Okay, but it's like the climate change argument. A lot of people don't want to believe this. A lot of vested interests are stacking up against we who know that the way of the future is a regenerative food supply. It's a food supply that replaces itself, not one that ends up at the bottom of the deep ocean. It's a food supply that doesn't tax the earth beyond what the earth can supply, which is what the modern diet does. So I'll leave that there because the people with the answers to the questions that I've been posing are sitting beside me.
The Americans are dying faster, so you can probably add to that with your, and I loved your term today, constipated imagination. And yes, would you like to describe that a little more fully? Why there is a constipated imagination in the psyche of the United States?
You know, you can't have a sustainable civilization or regenerative sustainable abundance, we'll use the term for the conference here, system when your economy, when you measure your economy so that when you destroy the ecology, it's an economic asset. You know, if I pollute the river out by my house, that's viewed as an economic asset to gross domestic product because it creates jobs to clean it up. You have to buy equipment to clean it up, and you have to do a bunch of stuff to clean it up. And so this inability to actually economically measure, I appreciate Julian pointing out that it's an economic thing. We're creative enough to put men on the moon, to send, satellites to Mars or whatever, but we're not creative enough to call a prison a gross domestic product liability and a polluted river a gross domestic product liability and antibiotic resistance an economic liability. None of these things do we measure, and so this perpetuates the fraud that cheap food is acceptable, that we can continue going on. It masks the true costs and the true viability of where we are, and somewhere along the line we need to I don't know, maybe it's a question for Julian.
Reinvent the food system.
Well, can I make a suggestion here? Because in Australia there are proud claims that the Department of Health is a very interesting one, that it continues to have a growth budget. And I would actually like to rename it the Department of Illness for what it really is, and call it, because I'm healthy, I have actually no need for the Department of Health. But if we call it for what it is, and as Julian alluded to, that with all the non-communicable diseases that are around, the NCDs, which are caused by what goes down our throats and what we breathe from the pollution and epigenetics, then if we actually focus on what illnesses are, and it's the same with the prisons, it's a growth industry. Who have the vested interests in these things? It's a very perverse business case, but it's there nonetheless.
It really gives you pause when you write books like You Can Farm, to realize that I would have twice as many possible sales if I wrote a book on You Can Be a Successful Inmate. That's a sobering thought,
I was listening to a broadcast a few months ago about from a woman being interviewed on Conversations, which is a very popular ABC program here, and she was jailed for white-collar crime. And she pointed out, so while she was there, she did a law degree, as you do, thank you for the state, and she's now an advocate for prisoners. But she said, ever since the prison system has gone more and more to private enterprise, they have to have a continuous line of clients to make sure their business is successful. Thinking, why are we building more prisons? Why are we building more hospitals? Why don't we ask, why do we need more prisons? And why do we need more hospitals?
The rates of ill health are going up and up. And you're quite right. Of our health budget, $126 billion a year.
Is that just second after defence?
It's 5 times greater than defence. What? 5 times. But out of that, $126 billion a year is spent on trying to cure diseases which are incurable. These diseases are preventable, but they're not curable. They can give you drugs for your cancer, but they don't actually ever cure it. They might put you in remission. But so, the answer is not to get the disease in the first place. And that's where a healthy diet, and a healthy diet embodies food that has been grown in a healthy ecosystem. You cannot produce a healthy diet out of a polluted ecosystem. And we've been spending the last 50, 70 years polluting the agricultural ecosystem as hard as we can go. Now, there are 5 million tonnes of pesticides sprayed on the world's farms every single year now. And I mean, we think it's pretty bad in the Western world, but it's nightmarish in China and India, because they've got no control or restriction over the amount of chemicals to be used. And Farmers who use chemicals very often have the view that more is better, and
Isn't that the moron principle?
we have polluted ourselves and our entire planet. With chemicals, look, some of them have got uses, but most often we do not know what effect they have on human beings. We have not actually done the basic science around these chemicals, and we certainly don't know what effect they have in combination with all the other stuff that's in your environment, the stuff that's coming out the back of the truck, the stuff that's coming out of your furniture, the stuff that's in your water supply, and so forth. So we are all guinea pigs in a gigantic chemistry experiment, which is being perpetrated on us, really, by people who don't care. And, young people particularly, have to take charge of this issue. Basically, in the 1930s, a third of household disposable income went to food. Okay, and today, for Australia, America, and most European households, the figure is 10%.
Yeah.
So it's come down dramatically. And of course, people have used the spare cash to buy flat screen TVs and facelifts and holidays in
The Kardashians?
yeah, absolutely. In conspicuous consumption. But the problem here is that we are rewarding the farmer far, far less than they were getting in 1930. The farmer is not being paid to look after the landscape, the water, the wildlife any longer. And the economic message that is reaching farmers, is just go, hell for leather for yield. Who cares whether the stuff is edible or not? It doesn't really matter. You've just got to get maximum corn, maximum soybeans, whatever it is. And you do that, by ignoring all the rules and spraying and fertilising till kingdom come. The problem is there is no reward in the modern economic system, or not sufficient reward, for doing what you guys do, which is caring for the landscape, thinking about the entire productive system, especially the soil. If you simply throw fertiliser at the problem, you know what happens. You mine the soil. You lose all the micronutrients out of that soil. The carbon goes. The soil ceases to be a living organism and becomes a dead, sterile medium for holding plants upright. So basically, what's wrong is the financial system. The financial system is rewarding people for doing the wrong thing. How do we change that around? That is the thing that's really been exercising me. So I've been watching this for 50 years as a rural journalist. I've been watching that terms of trade for farmers come down by 1 or 2% per year. Costs going up, market price coming down. And they've been doing it by going round and round the world and screwing the farmers wherever they can find them. If the green beans in East Anglia are too expensive, they grow them in Jamaica. They're too expensive in Jamaica, they grow them in Kenya. They're too expensive in Kenya, they grow them in Tanzania. So they've been bankrupting farmers all over the planet now to get the cheapest possible produce. And this is destroying the agro-ecosystem. So this is a one-way street, ladies and gentlemen. This will bring down the world food system if we do not stop it, if we do not find another way. This is why we need to rethink food. That's my point. We need to actually reinvent this stuff that we call food. And that includes the methods by which it is produced.
At the end of the day, I know it's easy to say they and them and those people and all that, but at the end of the day, it's the market. It's the end consumer that actually starts the money into the funnels, that moves, that decides, are we going to feed this dog, which dog is going to live? Well, the one we feed. So ultimately consumers. So Pennie, I'd like to hear, I serve about 50 restaurants and some caterers, and our farm does. I don't do anything. And so we serve all these, and there's a consistent hurdle to make our authentic integrity farm story compute to dollars for you. And how do you, so you've got a client and you say, well, the plate's going to be this cost. Ooh, that's $1 more than we were expecting. So somehow you have to sell that price point because all of our costs are in. We're not killing people, we're not giving diarrhea, we're not reducing soil, our costs are in. I always say we've got the cheapest food on the planet, but that doesn't mean the cost is less. There's a difference between, you know, the price tag and the actual cost of that food. So how do you message to connect that dot with the ultimate buyer, to make that story go all the way?
Thank you. It's a great question. And I've been playing in this little playground for probably 25 to 30 years. And what I have noticed more and more is emotional connection. And I learned so much from you when I first saw you in 1998, when you were in Orange. And
Wow, 98.
yeah.
30 years ago?
I know. So what you said then stood me on my head completely. And it was remarkable. So you talked about the emotional connections that people have. And the emotions are the glue that bring and bind people together. And that has been such an invaluable lesson for me. And we can use our emotions with food. I see food as the most delicious vehicle to do that with people. And I thank Nita and Drew Cook for the Red Rascal potato mash tonight, and for Alan and Leanne from Millwall Organic Beef for that delicious skirt, blade and brisket that we had, and the garlic and the lemons and the parsley that were grown here, which is the gremolata. And the people who've grown those have names, they have hearts, they have personalities, they have faces and dreams and ideals and passions and flaws like we all do. These are the emotions that connect us. We're all people, first and foremost. And so that emotional glue I try to make into an ingredient. And love is a very powerful ingredient when you're cooking, as you who cook know. And a meal made with sincere doses of love tastes so much better than something that's just slapdash together. So I use the emotions to bring people together, and celebrating or conviviality around a table, as personified by the slow food movement, is very much part of that. And as families, sometimes you might think, oh my God, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? What does everybody want to eat? But then you slow down, breathe, and think, wow, what a privilege to be able to cook food that I know who's grown it for my family, which is the absolute mainstay of my life. And we just put into the gratitude that we are such privileged people here to have access to most beautifully grown food, grown with passion and love and care. So that's what I look at. I actually do not count a dollar.
Right. No, well, I know, but a lot of people do. And I guess my question, look, you know, I'm here looking for free marketing advice here, everybody. If there's a secret to moving society to another 10% of people who get it, I don't know what the recipe is. I mean, Julian, you're scaring people to death, so you got the science. I get that. But ultimately, people do make decisions based on emotion. And so, you know, where's the... How do you make that story work so that we can actually move people forward? Because the people who get it are still a very, very small part. Most people, you know, as long as the TV is on, there's beer in the fridge, and the Kardashians are on the front page of People magazine, life is good, all is well. And so somehow we have to, maybe it's a combination of science and emotion, I don't know, but I'd be glad to hear what messaging recipe there is to move this.
Well, what I've observed over the past few years, and particularly since regenerative agriculture has really gained a name and a reputation and a taste and a flavour, is that more and more people are committed, and I've been, as I said, I've been playing in this playground for about 25 years. So I've been looking at buyer behaviour and consumer desires all this time. What makes them want to buy organic as opposed to other stuff? There are very serious considerations and decisions that people make for that, and often it starts when they become new parents. So how can we do this? And then you've got the cultural creatives, which is a wonderful description for a group of people who, let's say they're hippies, go to hippies, well-educated, yes. And it's these people who have had a high degree of consciousness over some things in their lives. They realise what is important to them, and they follow their desires and their actions. So I think there's an enormous opportunity now for Regen Ag to create a new market segment, because people often tell me, look, I want to be buying this food. I really want to support the farmers now who care about how they live with their land, and they make a living with their landscape, not from their landscape. I want to be part of this movement, but where do I get it? And so we're actually looking at a huge opportunity to provide accessibility. This, I think, is where we can bring in and satisfy the demands of people who are really consciously making decisions around the choices of their food. But where can I get it?
So you're saying access is a big hurdle.
Yes.
I tend to agree with you. Julian, what do you think the star message is? You know, if you were my marketing agent, you know, how would you move us to a new segment, you know, in persuasion, move us down the population?
There's nothing that concentrates the mind like a hanging. We're going to see famines in the mid-century, right? We're currently wasting 75 billion tonnes of topsoil every year. We're losing 1% of the world's farmland every year now. So in 50 years' time, we'll have lost half the world's farmland. We will have a climate which is much more unstable than the one we've got today. And it's going to get more and more unstable all through the century. Very hard to farm outdoors in this climate that is coming down. And the water crisis is already on us. It may not be here in Australia, but in China and India, there is a really, New Delhi is going to be out of groundwater in 2 years. You know, that's a city of 25 million people. So, you know, these things are compounded to make the food supply. So I'm saying it's probably not markets that are going to do it. It's probably one whopping big food scarcity worldwide. It will drive the price of food up to such a degree that people will start to respect it again. Because one of the effects that gentleman mentioned of the price of food coming from a third of your wages down to a tenth of your wages is that people have no respect for the food or the people who grew it or the environment that nurtured it. Right? They lost respect, so they throw their pizza in the bin. Okay? And as we know, 1 in every 3 of the world's farmers are currently employed growing food, which nobody ever eats. I mean, that's disgraceful. Something like 300 million farmers are producing food that nobody ever eats. A third of the world's food is being trashed. This cannot.
You're trying to connect the dots, because 30% of the food gets thrown away.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
30 to 40%.
I never thought of it in those terms. I always knew the figure 30 to 40% gets thrown away, but it never dawned on me, okay, so that means a third of the farmers are wasting their time.
A third of the agricultural science is wasted.
Everybody got that dot? I never put those together before. Yeah. Another point of that is what we could do then is have a national policy that farmers don't get paid anything, and it would only affect the price of food 10%. That's the one I like.
We have a distribution crisis, and once you actually start valuing food, then you'll start to find the distribution solutions that you need. Because right now, it's a damn sight easier just to grow more food and throw it in the bin than actually getting it from point A to B. And I think that's, for me, is where we really need to be focusing on, not increased food. Because increased food means increased waste.
You're not going to feed Africa from America. right? The only way Africa gets fed is if they grow their own food. And nobody's going to pay for all that corn to be put on a ship and sent to Africa and distributed into the heart of the Congo or something. Nobody's going to pay for that. So every society
Doesn't that depend on
has
the point?
to have a sustainable food system. Every society has to have that.
Couldn't agree more.
Or we've got we're in deep trouble, basically.
Yeah, ultimately, you can't food bank your way out of food insecurity.
Yeah.
You have to have a community has to be food secure within not that every community is going to grow coffee or bananas, but within a geographic region,
Yeah.
the more, if you grow 80% of what you're doing within that region, you can be food secure. But if you don't, you're not.
I do have an answer for this question, and I'd like to put it short.
Yeah.
Back in 1997, when I first got involved in Regen Ag, so I feel like a bit of a grandpa of the movement. It was called holistic management, and met a guy called Bruce Ward, who was my mentor. Bruce always said to me, deal with the known. What I'm hearing from a lot of people is a lot of scaremongering. I think the climate is changing, but we need to deal with the known. I recently went to a farm thing and they told us that temperatures are going to rise by 2%. I said, okay, prove it. They can't prove it. Yes, things are going to change. We need to temper back the descriptions, stop being quite so hellfire and brimstone, or we're going to lose our consumers. So at the moment, we see a lot of people saying, thank the farmer for your next meal and all that sort of stuff. Shouldn't we thank our consumer? Like, they need us more than... We've got to turn things around, and I understand what you're saying about, yes, things are going to get harder, things are going to become more volatile. But if we go out there behind a pulpit telling people this sort of thing, when we actually don't know, like the temperature might increase by 2 degrees, it might increase by 1 degree, it might increase by 5 degrees, it might even get colder. We don't really know. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to lose our consumer base and going to alienate them even more, and that's a problem. The other problem I see is I think this Regen Ag movement needs to get a little bit more guts around it. With social media is a great thing for people to be advertising what they're doing, but I'm starting to see a few people who are out with their offset discs and topsoil flying everywhere, and they're putting hashtag Regen Ag, which sort of flies in the face of what it's about. So I think that it would be great at some point if we start dealing with the known and start getting a little bit of solid groundwork around this. Otherwise, the terminology in the movement's going to get bastardised too much, and I think that'll be a real biggie.
I hear what you say, and look, years ago I used to have the enormous, some advice was given to me, you can have a circle of influence and a circle of concern and a circle of influence. You can waste your whole life worrying about your circle of concern because it involves everybody. Your circle of influence is where you actually put your rubber to the ground. It's where you can make a difference. And I think when we're talking about energy, which is a very important part of Regen Ag and the entire world movement, but how it operates, is putting your energy to the best effect. And what I would like to see in Regen Ag is a lot more discussion about different business models. We're still looking at commodification. We're still looking at produce which has been beautifully grown with love and passion, and we're actually getting some benefits at the soil level. But there's still no other way of doing it apart from just lots. So I want to introduce value and yield. Now, yield is not about your productivity, your tonnage, it's about your monetary yield. And that comes through value and adding value and differentiating. That's why I think there's a really big opportunity now for Regen Ag as a brand to have that accreditation and certification by community from the people who want to buy it. And it's about bringing people together, those who want to buy it, those who want to grow it. It's just called business.
I've got a piece of money in my hand. I just want to make this point because it's very important. Agriculture is driven by money, right? Money is a figment of the human imagination. It does not exist in the real world. It did not exist before we came along. It will not exist after we're gone. Dogs don't use money. Fish don't use money. We invented it to exchange them. It has no actual real value. 90% of the world's money doesn't even exist in this form. It's in electrons and computers. It's not even real stuff. You can't even touch it. So the problem is we've got a finite planet with a fixed amount of soil, a fixed amount of water, a fixed amount of biota living on it, a fixed amount of nutrients. This stuff is infinite. How do we know that? Because in the economic crisis in 2008, that came about because banks were plucking this stuff out of thin air and lending it to people, right, who then went broke and they sold the bloody debts. So all that money in the GFC was imaginary money, came out of thin air. How did they fix the GFC? The banks in the United States and central banks of the world got together and they plucked $3.5 trillion out of thin air. Now, if you're using an infinite commodity like money on a finite planet, you're going to run out of planet long before you run out of money. Okay? And that's the problem that agriculture's got. They can throw the stuff at agriculture and expect that agriculture will keep on moving. We're getting a false signal. I don't want to go into this in great detail. I just want to leave you with the thought that money is what is driving this whole system downhill. We can try and play the money game, but that is not going to solve the problem in the long run. There is a signal that is destroying the soil, the water, the biota, and it's this imaginary damn stuff. So that needs to change. We need a currency that is founded on real things. An earth standard currency, founded not on gold, but on soil, water, and biota. The things that create life on earth. Okay? So that is one of the solutions to this. We do actually have to pay farmers in real money, not in fucking toy money. Sorry, pardon my French. We need an earth standard currency is one of the solutions to this issue. But the next thing is that farmers are not being paid to look after the agricultural environment. You guys should be getting, on top of what you get for your produce, you should be getting a subsidy from all Australians, all Americans, for looking after their landscape for them. You're doing it for free. All the trees that you plant and things like that, you're doing it for free out of the goodness of your heart and you're caring for the land. At the moment, there is no reward for that. I personally would have a 10% GST on food in this country, and I would give the lot to our farmers to regenerate their farms, to adopt the kind of principles that you guys are pursuing in developing a regenerative, ecologically sustainable agriculture. Okay?
But Julian, if I may push back just a little bit on that, sure. If we actually had the political will to invent, to change the system that dramatically, so that it was politically doable, wouldn't that mean inherently that enough people in the market understood to just start buying from people like us? I'm just posing it, I mean, as a political reality, because, you know, I mean, we've just been accused of pie in the sky over here, so which is fine. And so I'm trying to think through as a practical matter, okay, policy, yeah, but what actually drives policy? We just had an election here in Australia, and so the will of the people was expressed at a certain level, and so I'm not big on government solutions, but I do agree that if the society had the will to do that, they probably wouldn't be going to McDonald's. What do you, is that?
Can I just,
sure.
Talking about Vermont, isn't Vermont a really well-developed and sophisticated state now, with food systems which are fairly independent and very locally based? There's no currency within Vermont that is separate to the US, or in addition to the US dollar, so that there's trading with a different currency. As I understand, the Vermont food system is up there sending me propaganda in their newsletters. Oh hell, I thought there was hope.
You don't know what can happen between Vermont and here. That's a long ways. long ways for things to happen. I know that Maine is driving the food sovereignty movement, but that's not an economic thing. That's a human right thing, food sovereignty thing. But Julian, I know you had a couple of things to say. I didn't want to cut you off, but I did want to just mention, ask for your idea on that.
I'm completely confident we can feed 10 billion people, just not the way we're doing it today, okay? The food system of the late 2050s, the second half of the century, will have 3 legs. Regenerative agriculture, urban farming. Why cities? Because you can recycle all that waste nutrient and water back into food. Not maybe agricultural systems, but it's still food. You can keep these people fed. And aquaculture. There's an awful lot more. We haven't really cropped the oceans yet, and we're going to start doing that. So those 3 things are going to be the pillars of the future world food system. How are we going to pay for this? The short answer is, at the moment, the world is spending $1.8 trillion a year on new weapons. And we're spending $70 billion a year on research into better ways to farm and better food, okay? So human beings, you and I, ladies and gentlemen, are members of a species that spends 35 times more on better ways to kill people than on better ways to feed people. An awful lot of money is wasted trying to kill people or kill other people's taxpayers. If you took 20% of the world military budget and you put it into agricultural R&D and you put it into sustainability, you gave it to farmers to regenerate their landscapes, you might have to water it, but you could still do that. If you did that to 20%, that's about $300 billion, you would actually change the whole name of the game. You people would receive a payment from the government for your role as stewards of the earth, as well as your role. You would get a separate payment as food producers. I think farmers have got to be seen in the coming world as stewards of the earth. Because you are stewards of it. You are the only people, you and the indigenous people of the world are the only people looking after landscapes and water on this scale. Right? You leave it to these big corporations, they'll just plough it under. So we have to find a way to reward farmers. So that's going to do it.
Is this all farmers or just good farmers?
Sorry?
Is this all farmers or just good farmers?
Well, there's going to be a sorting out. Climate change is going to provide a sorting out. And people who are committed to the industrial system are going to fall over first. And look, we were discussing before what happened to the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire fell when the grain supply collapsed. That's going to happen again. The forecasts that I have seen are that basically rice, wheat and corn yields are going to drop by somewhere between 40 and 50% at 4 degrees. That's 2100. So if we get a global temperature of that level, you're looking at around close to a halving of the yields of the world's grain belts. Now, all right, other places are going to open up, so there'll be some offsetting there. But it's going to be a damn hungry time. And that is going to motivate people, I believe, to look at more sustainable ways of farming. They will be forced to look at it. And the supermarkets at the moment are punishing farmers for producing good food instead of rewarding them. Unless we change the monetary system, that's not going to change.
It's like I was just in Perth, and day before yesterday, and met with a group of farmers, and one was growing 100. He was transitioning out of chemicals, growing 100 acres of lettuce. All right, that's a lot of lettuce. But because he was transitioning out of chemicals, he was getting pollinators, birds, frogs, different things. And he could say, okay, so last year, he sends a tractor-trailer load of lettuce into the processor, gets a call an hour later, we're not going to buy any more of your lettuce this year because a frog came in the truck. Lost hundreds of thousands of dollars from a frog. His point was, we ought to be getting a $10,000 incentive for the frog because it shows that we've got a biologically alive system. So the question is, what would it take to get consumers to look for a frog in their lettuce like they look for a Cracker Jack prize in a Cracker Jacks box? So that you change that conversation from one of sterility and fear of whatever living things to a basic. I mean, you would think, as much as we know, that we would have that basic an understanding of ecology.
But there is ecological illiteracy.
Yeah.
It's not just in consumers, it's in a whole lot of people who call themselves farmers. Mm-hmm. They've got no idea of any ecological systems because they've been educated by their agronomists, who again have a very simplistic view of what it is to grow stuff. But I'm reminded of the old Spanish proverb. The difference between civilization and anarchy is 7 meals. And we live in a polite society. And yet, even in Australia and New South Wales, there are signs that this polite society is falling apart. And my mother lives in Deniliquin, which is in the Murray irrigation area. And the irrigators there have had zero allocation. Peter Randall, where have you? You had 7% water this year, so you've been able to grow 7% of your normal rice crop, which is Peter and Jenny Randall are organic rice farmers. Absolutely brilliant business model, value adding. And Mum said the Premier went there a few weeks ago and she said, I've never seen security like it in town. I thought, well, what do you mean? She's just the Premier. She said, no, because people are so angry at seeing the rivers full, the Murray running banker, the Edward River, on its way to South Australia with 100% allocation for irrigation and water. This is a tipping point. And I've had a little folder on my desktop called Polite Anarchy for a few years now, and I think we're actually getting close to having to action it. It might be called civil disobedience. We've all taken the paths of this is how you go about lobbying for change with government. It counts for jack shit. So I think now that we actually start having, we've got a vision. We've got a collective vision here. We've got a collective vision with Joel and what he's been doing around the world. Stop waiting for governments. We're all going to get terribly old and grey.
Do you think when that happens, suddenly mobile processing will not be having to spend $3 million just to get permission to kill a beef on your farm?
I've been looking at what happens when you keep squashing down something harder and harder, which is more about compliance, and stuff comes out the sides. This is the area that I'm really interested in. And I think it's called the black market as one of the names. This is where our energies are going, because we're not going to take time to wait around for bloody people who've got no idea about what they're doing. They just read rule books. And Joel, you've educated me to this so much about the pressures and lobbying abilities of vested interest in agribusiness and processors. Oh, how long are we going to wait?
Last weekend in February, that's what it is. In Cincinnati, we're having the first National Rogue Food Day. And it's... No, rogue, R-O-G.
Rogue. I think it's rogue.
As in, it's now the tipping point has happened where it's cheaper and more efficacious to circumvent the law than to comply with the law. So we have a burgeoning number of people in the U.S. who are direct marketing, who have found loopholes, like a lady in North Carolina that has started a food church. It's an actual registered, nonprofit NC3 church. Instead of the Presbyterians, it's the food church. And members enjoy the congregational food, and it comes out of commerce. In commerce is where they get you, right? So they trade, and so all the farmers join the church, the congregants, consumers join the church, and they get to enjoy, and the state can't touch them, and they're having a fit. But these things are popping up around the country, and it's very exciting. Like you said, you push on that sponge, stuff starts squeezing out the edges, and so we're seeing that for sure.
And this is creativity. This is why it's exciting now, because we have so many creative minds in this room, and for people who couldn't be here, let's use our creativity. And Chris and Jane, what you're doing, absolutely wonderful. You've been pushing away at that for so long, and could all heart and hail to you. And we will all be part of this. Thank you very much. So let's use our creativity and create the new rules.
I just, have you heard of guerrilla gardens in Australia? Well, you know, it's the same thing. These are people who live in cities, in high-rise apartments, but they're planting vegetables on the median strip and beside the pavement and the traffic island and things like that. It's a gesture of revolt against, the dead-handed bureaucracy. It's also people crying out as urban dwellers for that farming background that they all had a generation or two ago. They all came off the land. They didn't always live in cities, But people have a deep atavistic love of their food and of producing it. And that's one of the things that we've got to play on. I think it's going to be very important. So all of these things are possible. We can reinvent the world food system. There are some huge financial opportunities. Let me give you an example. I have a friend who's an agronomist in Tasmania, and he was taught this by the natives of Papua New Guinea, Bruce French. He's compiled a list of 32,000 edible plants that exist on this planet. Now, at the moment, we eat about 200 to 300 plants. There's 32,000 edible plants, all of which are capable of being in your food supply, of farming industries and things like that. There's a phenomenal richness on this planet which we've forgotten all about since we industrialised food. Since we industrialised food, we rely basically on 12 crops and animals, It's shocking. So there is this huge adventure in food and in agriculture yet to be, broached. So there are opportunities like that which are just going big. Wait until the chefs of the world hear about 32,000 ingredients that they've never heard of before. Things are going to start cooking.
No pun intended.
No, there's going to be 6,100 edible plants in Australia. Yes. And we eat, 4 or 5 of them at the moment?
Lemon myrtle.
Love to thank these guys. I think that was a fascinating discussion, and I really appreciate the contribution from the audience as well. I just wanted to say that from NutriSoil's perspective, we told you our values. We honour nature, we know that it knows, we support the leaders in regenerative agriculture, and we want to build the community in regenerative agriculture. So in whatever way we can, I don't feel like I've got all the solutions, or we have as a team even, but we can bring people together. I think we do that well.